Hello and happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Neos Academy. Today's focus is going to be on checklist. Now, my name is Brian Billig. I am the VP of Customer Education here at Assembly Software. And you and we're going to go on a little bit of an adventure today. Neos Academy is usually hosted by one of our awesome staff members, Eric Hill. Unfortunately, Eric's internet went out about 20 minutes ago. So you've got me. Checklist is a particular passion area for me, and I'm going to do my best to fill in, but I got some pretty big shoes to fill. So we're going to be covering a lot. I will shoot straight. The aspects of checklist that we're planning on covering today are more on the Neos administrator side. This isn't about, staff using their personal checklist. This is more about the firm's checklist setup, policies, procedures, that sort of stuff. That said, if you're a case manager or you're an attorney and you're just working your personal checklist, please feel free to hang out with us. A better understanding of the back end might make things easier for you on the front end, but I just wanted everybody to know what we're dealing with. Quick housekeeping. This is a Zoom meeting. Everybody's familiar with Zoom meetings. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom if you want to ask any questions. Again, usually we've got a team of people flying solo today. Hopefully Eric will at least be able to join us by phone. We'll see what happens. If I have some time at the end, I will try and tackle some of those questions for you. The target today is about 50 minutes. Checklist is big. There is a lot to cover. That's my goal, to get you out by about 12:50 Eastern time. All right, let's go. I'm going to share my screen again here. There we go. Back to my slides. The first thing I want to talk about is checklist conceptually. For your firm, it's all or nothing. It is the most powerful tool, in my opinion, in your Neos arsenal, and it can do amazing things by tracking every single data point along each and every one of your cases, which provides you that big macro data of everything that's going on in your firm. But a lot of times, I heard a ding dong, that might mean Eric is with us. But a lot of times what we hear from firms is that some people are using the checklist and some people aren't. And my take on that is, then why bother? Because bad data has a weight to it, and it is significantly heavier than good or accurate data. So for the sake of argument, let's say you've got 100 people in your law firm and 95 of them are using that checklist every day. Every item, they're going down the list, they're marking things as done. So 95% of your metrics are accurate, which you would think, hey, that's pretty good, right? It's not. It's not. From a checklist reporting perspective, if you have 5% of your people aren't using the checklist, then 5% of your cases aren't showing any progress. But it's not like those 5 people are only doing their cases in one little corner. They're probably touching a variety of cases. And if they're not using the checklist, then the additional checklist items behind what they're supposed to be doing aren't going to trigger. And that will propagate through your entire law firm. So proper checklist usage, non-negotiable here, must be the culture of your firm. And that starts with you. You guys, especially at the top, firm managing partners, Neos administrators, office managers, heck, the head of HR. The checklist is a culture for the firm, and that means everybody does it. Otherwise, there's not really a purpose. Now, when I give that little speech, when I hop up on my soapbox and I say, this is the way to do things, a lot of the times what I hear back is, oh, but it's overwhelming. there's too much. And I get that. There is the possibility of checklist overload, and it makes sense because your firm needs to find the balance between tracking and doing. Because legitimately, it makes total sense that the more tracking you do, the harder it is to do the tasks because they're spending so much time on tracking. Meanwhile, if you drop that all the way down and you're only doing and you're not tracking at all, then you have no idea what's actually being done. So you have to find that balance. Now, today we're going to talk about how to build out checklists and how to add checklist items. But I also like to point out that you don't just have to grow. If you're a firm that finds yourself in a situation where the checklists aren't being used, there's a whole bunch of, uncompleted checklist items hanging out there, and the reporting is just shot at this point, and you're trying to figure out how to get back to proper checklist usage, my top recommendation is to simplify the checklist, to cull it, because it's very easy to say, oh, well, I want this and I want that and I want this other thing, and you keep adding and adding and adding, and it gets out of hand. Human nature makes total sense. But if you need to bring your staff back on board, if you need to say, hey, we're going to do this now, everybody is going to do this now. Stacy, Jason, yes, everybody, we're all doing it. A great place to start is to cull down to a very simple checklist. Even if you're starting like a new case type or area for your firm, pick those very most important moments in a case and add a checklist item to them. And let's say, it's as small as 5 or 10 items. Then you establish that as a baseline. Your staff gets used to marking these things as done, and there's a relatively easy balance between tracking and doing. And then as that culture is established, as it takes hold and everybody starts to see the very real benefits of 100% checklist usage, you can start to tip that scale a little bit more, add some more items, add some more checklist items, and more things to track. And that can help move forward through this true culture of checklist. And of course, make it easier for bringing on new staff because everything they need to do is going to be right there. Okay, that is my soapbox about the absolute necessity of 100% checklist usage, with the caveat that, if things got out of control, there is the ability to simplify it. I do believe we may at least have audio of Mr. Hill. Are you with us, sir?
I am here, sir. Thank you.
And that sounds just as cell phone warbly as I would expect it to. But I told these guys before you joined, we're going on an adventure today. We're going to figure this out. We're going to do it together because the Comcast and Time Warner internet goblins come for all of us at some point, right? Okay,
the Xfinity modes are all in there.
Yeah, Xfinity. Okay, so what I'm going to do, Eric, the way that I'm thinking about, doing this, and I think you and I have a little bit of a delay, so we're going to talk over each other a little bit here, is I'm going to bring up Neos, and I'm going to let you kind of deliver your content. And as you do that, I will handle the screen share, and you handle the education. Does that work for you? All right. I don't know about you all, but that sounded like a resounding yes to me. Probably not. Let me open up a few panels here. Okay. So what I'd like to start with is explaining the checklist conceptually. And I apologize if this is a bit redundant for those of you that have been, rocking needles checklists for, 25 years at this point, and you've totally got it. I just want to back up a little bit and cover the basics here. So what I'm going to do is going to open up a classic Well, you know what? Let's go all the way back to the beginning here. To modify your checklists, we go to settings, and then we go to case types. And every case type has its own unique setup with fields and checklist, because the things that need to be done are obviously very different. We're going to go down to the classic MVA, and we've got a lot of things that we can customize here, but we want the primary checklist. Now, the checklist is just what it sounds like, a list of all the things that need to be accomplished by a variety of staff members in order for a case to reach a successful conclusion for the firm and for your client. I like to think of it, and you guys know I love this metaphor, as an assembly line in a factory. And each case has a checklist that's run down this assembly line, and it's passed off from staff member to staff member to staff member. But it's actually much more complicated than that, in a good way. So if you guys don't use this little carrot, this is great. If you need some screen real estate, you can collapse kind of the menu and see more here. So checklist items. Every case is going to have a full list of checklist items, and then individuals will have their moments on the assembly line of what needs to happen on each checklist. Each of these items are triggered by something that comes before it. Checklist items can be triggered in one of two ways. The first is a case date. So in every case in your system, under the case tab, you've got all of these important case dates: client released, MMI, demand sent, filed suit, all of these things that happen in all of your cases. When these dates are entered, checklist items can trigger off of these dates, or checklist items can be triggered off of the previous checklist item in line. And again, I know I'm doing checklist kindergarten right now, but I want to make sure we're establishing a solid base as we build up. So let me shrink this down and try to get as much of this view in here as possible. So this is our list of checklist items. This is what needs to be accomplished, right? And then every checklist item has a checklist code that tends to be, in alphanumeric sequence. Jesus, Brian, that was a lot of words. What the hell are you talking about? Basically, ABC 1, 2, 3. So you can see this starts with A05, A10, A15, A20, A25. The checklist items that we build out for you as part of Neos, we tend to leave spaces in between so that you can put stuff in there. So if you have, you can fit in an A06, 7, 8, or 9 in between A05 and A10. So these are the checklist codes. The next thing I want you to see is the ref. What's a ref? It is short for reference, meaning what this checklist item is referring to. So this very first one that we have in our primary checklist for our MVA case type, fee agreement, medical authorization signed, is referencing a COD case date. But then the next one, send client welcome letter. This is checklist code A10. What is it referring to? A05. So when A05 is marked as completed, A10 shows up, but not just A10. Look, all of these refer to A05. So when A05 is marked as completed, A10, 15, 20, and 25 show up. Let me see if I can get my also. No, I don't have what I want in here. Chris is asking if checklist codes can be longer than 3 characters. That is a fabulous question, Chris. And the answer is yes. Now, I know you're a Needles guy, and that didn't used to be the case. It had to be 3 characters. That limitation is gone. I don't remember how many they are, but you can get a little crazy in here. Let me fix this because now I'll get all out of order and mess with my head. But yes, you can customize these codes to now, build them out to be longer, be a little more descriptive if you want them to be, however you want to handle it. You can also color code checklist items. So this all looks, very simple. I've got this one, and then I've got like my limb dates, warnings in yellows and reds. But a big white checklist is honestly a big boring checklist. So if you want to go in and color code your checklist so that you can see at a glance when you're looking at your checklist exactly what needs to happen. See, mine's pretty bland. Got a little bit of khaki in there. You can tweak the colors literally again by coming in here, clicking the color and choosing whatever color you want. Lots and lots of options. So you can color code all of that, just like you can color code your documents in the Docs tab. So the next thing to be aware of is who is responsible for these checklist items. So this is a big boring list because it says paralegal mostly, but I've got some records in here, case manager, attorney. So in our assembly line, we have our tasks and we have our, due dates and we have our people. So who is this going to be assigned to? Now, when you're setting up the checklist in the settings, in the case type settings, thank you, Lauren. The checklist codes have been expanded to 10. So you can now fit 10 characters in there. Go crazy. Don't go crazy, but feel free to expand upon what we've offered. Now, what I was saying was in the case type settings and the checklist setup screen, the staff is generic. I don't see Lauren. I don't see Eric. I don't see specific people here because this is basically the checklist template. This is the primary checklist. So we're not assigning it to specific people. We're assigning it to roles, specific roles. So the paralegal that is assigned to a particular MVA case will be responsible for sending the client welcome letter. Now let's open our case again. And we'll go back to our case tab, because if you remember, we have those case dates, which can trigger and start all of these checklists rolling, but we also have the assign to fields. And what do we see there? We see labels lining up with the checklist options and selections that we're making in our primary checklist setup. So you can see in this particular case, the paralegal is Sam Wilson. So what we're saying is when we're setting up the checklist, whichever paralegal is assigned, they will be responsible for this checklist item. But when you go into a specific case, a paralegal is assigned to the case, Sam Wilson, and now Sam Wilson is responsible for the paralegal checklist items for this specific case. All right, with me so far. Bernadette is asking if individual staff members can do their own color coding. No, they cannot. This is a firm-wide setting. So that way it doesn't matter who you are. If you color code sending a client welcome letter, then that's the color it's going to be for everyone. You don't want someone having it red, someone having it blue, someone it might get a little all over the place. So everything that we're doing in this settings screen is firm wide. If people want to customize colors, they are welcome to add whatever desktop wallpaper they like. But within Neos, these are firm wide settings. Okay, so there is more going on here. There's a lot more. The checklist concept started with just, hey, case date, trigger another item, and who's assigned to it. But over time, this is built significantly. So if you guys are rocking activity feed or some reporting on a case phase, this is where this comes from. The case doesn't have like a phase dropdown on the case tab that somebody goes in and change. It changes naturally as the case progresses through the checklist. And that's here. So we've got these checklist items, and we've got what phase they're associated with. So all these initial items are in the initial phase, And then as we proceed, we move into investigation, negotiation. We've got a couple of unphased items, like statute of limitations, that are going to pop up regardless of what phase the case is in. Intake, settlement. You can customize these. You can make them whatever you want them to be. But this helps track the phase of a case, how far along in a specific case we are, but it's based off of how far the individual case's checklist has moved. All right. I'm trying to move slow so that everybody can understand exactly what we're dealing with here. The next thing I want to show is just a couple of things that you can do with specific checklist items. So if you come in here and you see this icon, any Neos user should know that that is a parent checklist item, which means that it triggers additional checklist items. And we know that because we looked at our staff code. We know A05 is triggering 1, 2, 3, 4 more items. So parent item of A05 triggers A10, A15, A20. And then we see the same thing on A25. Once A25 is completed, it's a parent item because it triggers A26, and on and on and on and on and on. All right. If you need a document to be specifically associated with a checklist item, you can do that as well. So if we go into an individual case's checklist, certain checklist items have documents associated with them, which you would need the doc column visible to see. And where are we here? Shrink you back down. There we go. So there's a document column, and send client welcome letter obviously generates a document. And if I am the user, if I am the paralegal that we have said is responsible for generating, taking care of these checklist items, I get this great little plus symbol that's actually going to generate the document right there. I don't need to go find it. I don't need to pick it from a list. It's automatically associated with that checklist item. So you have the ability in the primary checklist to associate these documents with checklist items as well. Okay, so Laura has a great question and statement, and I'm going to read this for everybody because she is not alone. We desperately want to implement the checklist, but it's so hard starting from scratch and hard to test out because editing in live cases is very tricky. Please provide real-life useful starters for a small firm doing PI and wrongful death cases that firms can have success with. So, Lauren, you're right. It can be so intimidating. And we try to find the balance in the case types that we provide because, we have 1 user Neos firms, we have 10 user Neos firms, we have 200 user Neos firms with significant levels of complexity. But let's say, instead of coming in here and looking at all of this complicated stuff and all of these checklist items, we do want to start, and we want to start simple, and we're going to start from scratch. So instead of coming in and modifying the MVA checklist, and I wanted to start here because I wanted to point out all of these different things so that you can see it. Let's go back. Yep, I want to leave. Settings, case types. Let's do a new case type. Now, there is a lot that goes into creating a new case type that we're not going to cover today. Fields, which tabs you want enabled, all kinds of stuff. But if we want to just talk about the checklist, let's say this case type is something super specific. We'll call it paper cut injuries. It's great when you misspell keywords in front of 100 people. So this is our paper cut injuries case type. And every case type needs to have at least 1 person responsible. Now, we'll probably go back and add, a couple different staff. So let's do that one. We'll save this. And let's add a few spots here. So let's say we want a case manager and we want a paralegal. And we'll change our sequence here and we'll save. Okay, so these are the, okay, so it's all right, still work. So these are my people that I have to work with in my paper cut injury case type. Now, let's go to our primary checklist. No, I want to save. Why does it want to save that? Okay, well, we'll discard it and see what happens. Oh, boo. Why you got to do this to me when I'm shooting from the hip, huh? Attorney, save. Okay, all right. So we got that. Welcome to a blank, wide open checklist. And this is for you, Lauren. If this is something that you guys want to tackle and you want to say, hey, I want to keep it super simple. So what we'll do is we'll add a checklist item and we will call this initial call with client. And we will call it A, because we have so many spaces here, we'll call it A0001. And we'll give it a color of, let's just Roy G. Biv this bad boy. So we'll start a nice red. And we don't have a reference date on this because we haven't put in our dates yet, but we're going to assign this to the attorney, and this is the task that they need to accomplish, right? Okay, so save. You have added manual checklist. Do I want to add this to open cases? Well, the concept of this is if you're adding a checklist item to cases, to a case type that already has cases in your system, you can add that checklist item to those open cases, right? Or you can say, no, I just want to do this for cases starting now and moving forward. Since I don't actually have any paper cut cases, I'm just going to go ahead and save and not add it to those. So I've got my initial call with client, which is supposed to be made by the attorney. And I've got a code of A0001, right? Eric, just checking, man. You with me? You enjoying the show?
Of course I am. I'm wanting to answer the questions, of course, but it's kind of hard to answer some of them.
I imagine
With
you're trying to do all this in the Zoom app on your cell phone, and I have no idea what the Q&A panel looks like.
It takes over the entire screen, just as a heads up. So I'm on a 6.5-inch screen trying to look at everything. Of course, I have my readers on.
You got the little glasses and holding it away like a menu. I'm with you. All right, let's keep rolling.
Yeah.
So I've got my primary checklist. I've added my first item. Let's open this back up. Let's go to general. And we want to add another staff member. I don't know why I gave me trouble in before, but let's go ahead and save. Same question. Do you want to add this to all the open cases? No, because I don't have any of those. Okay, back to checklist. And now our attorney has had the initial client call, right? So we want to add another checklist item, which is, we can keep it really generic because we want a simple, easy checklist for Lauren and her team, just basic stuff. So we will say, collect all records. And we will call this A0005. And our next color in our Roy G. Biv will be orange. Okay. And this time it's going to be completed by the case manager. All looks good. Done. Save. Same question. Save. All right. Then we're going to add another one. Let's keep going. Let's add another staff member here. We'll add our paralegal in. save. Back to our checklist, and one more item. Collect all records. We'll call this submit demand. And this is going to be A010. I don't know if I did that right, but red, orange, yellow. By the way, I don't recommend actually doing a Roy G. Biv color scheme, but hey, it works for me. Oh, but what I didn't do on the last one is the reference. So what we're going to do is we're going to trigger this off of A005, and it's going to be done this time by the paralegal. And close, and let's go into this one. We want this one to be triggered off of A001. Okay, so yes. The first one's triggered off of the intake date. At intake date, the attorney, let's just assume we're taking the case, has the initial client call. When that's done, that triggers, A005 here. So I can see all these. The completion of A001 is the reference date for A005. So that shows up on the case manager's checklist. When that is completed, A005 triggers A010 on the paralegal's checklist. So right down the row, this is handed off one to the next. And for Lauren's purposes, if you want to build these out at this level of simplicity, by all means. Our whole deal, our whole shebang for Neos and Needles and TrialWorks before it is your ability to customize, to make the software fit your firm, not force your firm to fit some software platform that, a bunch of nerds like me came up with. You guys are the experts on how best to handle your firm and your clients. Okay, so we did a lot of kindergarten here. We did a lot of basics. I'm sure a lot of you have already shrunken me down to a smaller window and are probably got Neos open and are doing massive checklist modifications. So Eric, I'm going to check in with you, brother, and say, because you built the agenda for today's webinar, and say, which area would you like me to head in next?
Did you cover the admin settings? That's one of the first things, to make sure that those people that are going to be doing those checklists have the correct permissions and the correct rights.
What a fabulous point. You're correct. So just like the checklist is wildly customizable, permissions are wildly customizable. Well, let me ask you a question. Are we going to want, everybody in the firm to just saunter on behind the background, behind the curtain here, and start making changes to checklists and then saving them to all open cases? Heck no.
No way.
No way.
No way.
So just like I said at the beginning of this webinar, everything that I'm showing you here, this is for the Neos admins. This is for the database administrators. This is for the firm managing partners to direct how they want the firm to roll. So under settings, and we're going to go back down to permissions. Now, this can be handled in one of two ways: permission groups or, individual staff profiles. Now, you can go into individual staff profiles and modify one person's permissions, but that's the hard way. And I'm not going to go real deep into permissions in this webinar because that's not our subject for today. But what I recommend is creating permission groups by roles. So in my system here, I've got attorneys and case managers and paralegals and accounting staff, and they all have different permissions to access different areas of the program. But I have an administrator role right here. And your administrator role should be two things. One, they should have access to everything. So if I expand all, I should see all kinds of green, well, bluish green. I think it's, what is that called, Eric? Miami blue?
It is definitely the Miami teal.
The Miami teal, I like it. So your administrator should have access to everything right down the list. That should all be lit up. The second thing that's a requirement for the administrator role, if I click on the staff members, it should only be a couple of people. Heck, man, I got too many people as admin. Look at it. Who's this schlub? Who's this guy who's an administrator in my system? Unacceptable. I'm not actually going to take him off, but I will take off.
I'm just like, take him out. Take him out.
Depending on the size of your firm, I would really only recommend between 1 and 5 people have this level. Well, it should never be 1 person, at least 2. 2 to 5 people have this administrator level access, because like we just showed, they have access to everything, including modifying, the setting screens, which is a big deal. So anybody from this group that should have that access to make those changes should be in that administrator role. Anybody else should not. They should be appropriately an attorney or case manager or paralegal or accounting or reception or intake or whatever role you want to build out for them and build those permissions for them. Do that. I know the easy thing to do is to say, well, I only have 8 people and I trust them all with my firstborn, so I'm just going to give everybody access because that's simpler. Okay, you need that to get up and running day 1. Fine, but one of the next steps you should do is build a bucket, even if it's a bucket with a lot of access, and put people there and not have everybody have access to the full administrator settings. All right. Does that check the box for you, Mr. Hill?
100% it does. I know that those things will come out when people start getting into it and saying, hey, I don't have rights and access to do these things. That's why I want them to have at least cover that.
Absolutely. All right. What else you got? What else do you want to cover? I promised these guys about 12:50. So we've got about 13 minutes left. And I've done the kindergarten. How much farther would you like to push the envelope?
Let's push it down to, let's say a checklist or a case comes in. It's an MBA case. We have our checklist. It looks perfect. But now it moves to litigation. So we want to add an auxiliary checklist to that. So we don't have 80 things or 40 things up front. We can do the 10 that we need to handle in the first 30, 60 days. But as that case is progressing, I want to keep adding more stuff to it. So I can create an auxiliary checklist and then add that checklist.
You are absolutely correct. So first, let's go ahead and define those terms. So every case has a primary checklist, and this is what we've been talking about, what we've been building. You build out the checklist that's associated with this case. These are the steps that we take every time, regardless. This is what we do whenever a case comes in. But there's a whole nother category called auxiliary checklists. And auxiliary checklists are, I'll call them grab them when you need them checklists. So the most prominent example of this is a litigation checklist. Now, depending on what type of firm you have, you may handle a lot of litigation, or it may be the very small minority of your cases. You try to negotiate and get settlements for most of them, and every once in a while, the insurance company just doesn't want to play ball. So we're going into litigation. You don't need litigation checklist items incorporated into your primary checklist if they only represent 10% of the cases that your firm handles. But they have their own same steps that need to be followed every time it does happen, those 10% of the time. So we built in this feature called auxiliary checklist that you can go and kind of pull off a shelf and plug into a case whenever it's necessary. And I don't know how to do it. So Eric, if you would do me a favor, you narrate and I will demonstrate. But let's say we've got our paper cut case type here, and paper cut litigation gets super serious. So if we wanted to first create and then add an auxiliary checklist to a case, how would we do that?
So we can go to settings real quick to create one.
Okay.
And then toward the top on the right-hand side, our auxiliary checklist, or As I'm seeing it now, it's in the second row.
Yes, that's based
and
on
at that
screen
point,
size.
I can click that.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. Then I can click the add button. And if I've already set up my primary checklist, I'm going to do the same thing with the auxiliary checklist and setting those things up with the codes, the refs, the docs, and anything else that needs to be associated or done that way. It's going to be set up the same way as the primary checklist.
All right. So we've got our auxiliary checklist. It's paper cut litigation. And the same concept here is, okay, so now this is a checklist. And you'll notice this is not associated with a specific, I called it paper cut litigation so that I know it's associated with that. But these auxiliary checklists, they don't have to be associated with a specific case type. You can create a litigation checklist that can then be brought in to any of your other case types if necessary. So you can create it like I have, case type specific, and just name it that way, or it can be case type generic and pulled in whenever you want. And then if we want to add a checklist item, we click, oh, I gotta save. And then we're gonna add an item, and it's the same concepts. What's the task name? What's the checklist, auxiliary checklist code that we're going to give it? Give it a color. What's the reference date? What staff are assigned to it? We've got all the same options, and you'll create it exactly the same way. So then let me go to an actual case here, and I've got this MVA case. Under the checklist tab, we have add auxiliary checklist. So if this case has been progressing and these checklist items have been progressing, but like we said, the insurance company, man, okay, you want to play? You want to go to trial?
You want to be hard-headed?
Yeah, let's do it. I'll teach you a lesson. I'll have the fine people of the state of Florida or Maryland or Pennsylvania or wherever I am teach your client a lesson. So we add auxiliary checklist, and it's right here, paper cut litigation. I select that. I add it in. Okay, are you sure you want to do this? There's some interesting information here. I recommend checking it out. But let's go ahead and say yes. Oh, I didn't actually add any checklist items. So Neos is warning me, hey, Brainiac, you just added a blank auxiliary checklist. But your auxiliary checklist will have items in it, and you can add it when necessary.
That's correct.
Okay. So that is the concept behind auxiliary checklists. When you need them, you pull them off the shelf. And you snap them in. Do we, Eric, ship with auxiliary checklists? Is that part of the initial setup?
I believe there's a standard 3 or 4, just like regular case types come with a couple of checklists. I think there's a couple standard auxiliary checklists that automatically come canned. So you can expand upon those or recreate. And again, those are there for you to get in that mindset or that thought process as you start going through and creating these things that, what are we thinking? Again, us at Assembly, we're thinking, hey, we're going to practice this way, but somebody else may practice a totally different way. And we at least want to get you in that mindset to set that checklist up, to set that auxiliary checklist up, to get those things moving for your firm.
Awesome. Okay. I do have a specific question from David Tompkins about automation and communication. And I want to hit on that briefly because what he's asking is there a way to have a trigger to send a message, email, or text when any particular checklist item is done? And the answer to that is yes, but it's associated with the pro tier of Neos. So Neos has, the standard SaaS, good, better, best tiers. And depending on what tier you're on, you have access to more and more features. So this is associated with the pro tier. And I'll just show you real quick how that works. So we'll go ahead and we'll do it on this one. Send rep letter to plaintiff's insurance. Let me pick a good one. Send demand. Okay, so let's say the demand is sent. We're going to go to details, and we've got this automation and the little pro icon that lets you know that this is, a piece of automation. We'll click this item, and this is case specific here. Sorry, reminder's going off. So automation name, text to client, demand sent. Okay, so we're going to build this out in a very Vulcan logic way. So the way this works is we need the trigger and the action. So the trigger that we've got here is when checklist status is changed. And we've got a couple options, but this is the checklist item right here. And what we're going to say is this is code B20 in MVA case types. This happens to be assigned to Sam Wilson in this case. And we're going to say when the status is changed to done. Okay. And then we're going to add an additional action. We can change intake status, but this is a case, so we don't need to worry about that. Send a text message or send an email. I'm going to say send a text message. So when checklist status is changed to done, then send text message. And we can choose from our text message templates if we like. Retainer agreement isn't applicable for what I've chosen here, but that's the template I have. And then you can say, who am I going to send it to? I'm going to send it to the first party in the case. And it's going to come from, and I can pick someone specific. Let's say I always want it to come from, our managing attorney who's all over all the advertising, or I can pick the trigger staff, the person that marked that checklist item is done, which we know is Sam Wilson. So if Sam Wilson marks this as done, we're going to send a text message with the template, retainer agreement to the first party from the person who triggered the checklist item, and I can change the subject of the body of the text or the email however I want, and I can save that. And then that is going to automate that process moving forward in MVA cases when checklist code B20 is marked as done, send this text message to that person. Okay, why do we want to do that, Brian? My favorite example of how to use this functionality is keeping your client posted on the status of their case. So what you can do is create a couple of different templates that says, hey, your case is moving from the investigation phase to the negotiation phase. And then you build this template out that explains to the client what that means. So we have sent a demand to the insurance company, and we've included all this information, and we're demanding that they compensate you for your injuries. And you keep it somewhat generic because you want it to be appropriate, for whichever case it's being used for. And you build out 3, 4, 5, 6 of those at different key points in the case. And then you set up automations like this to just go ahead and send it so that your staff doesn't have to call the client 5, 6, 7 times and give them updates or remember to type up an email or a text message. You can have Neos do that for you so that when as the case proceeds and when it crosses these milestones, that communication is sent automatically, letting the client know exactly what the status is of their case and making them feel connected and communicated with and happy with their choice of attorney and law firm. So I meant that to be a fast explanation, David, but that is the functionality that is available to you with Pro. Okay, go ahead and close that up. All right, we are at 12:49, and I feel like in my long-windedness, covered maybe half of what you would have been capable of covering, Eric. So I apologize. I'm filling shoes here. Okay, so let me see what else I have. Christy asks, can you show us how to add a task that is not a template within the checklist? Meaning a checklist item that is not a document. So if I go to settings and case types, and where did I hide paper cut and primary checklist? So let's say this is an existing one and I just want to add one in. It's very simple. You click that add button and you say, this is my new fancy checklist item. Give it a code. This one's going to be A0003 because we're sticking it right in the middle here, but it's still going to be triggered by A001, and we're going to make it the responsibility of the paralegal. Save, And now my new fancy checklist item is in the middle there. Our buddy Chris mentions that advanced training is available by the hour. So we're recording today. We will send this video out. But if you want someone to hold your hand and walk you through the creation of a checklist, let's say you're creating a whole new case type, a new area of law that you're getting into, and you want some help, we do have trainers that are on staff, and you provide an hourly rate to literally hold your hand and walk you through this, or at least get you started until you really got the concept and can run with it yourself. Rebecca asks, how many phases are available to associate with the checklist items, and where does that phase come into play elsewhere in Neos? Here's what I'm going to do. Rebecca, you opened yourself up to this. You did this. I am going to allow you to talk because you asked such a good question, and I know how talented you are. Why don't you come on in and answer it for us?
Oh, come on, Brian.
Hey, if you're going to come to my webinar and you're going to give me questions, I'm going to invite you in and you're going to hang out with. I should have done this at the beginning. You should have just come on board and joined me right up front. How are you, Rebecca?
I'm great.
So we'll talk about this in a minute, but Rebecca is working with one of our Neos firms, but also helped me build out something very cool called Neos University. And I'll fill you guys in on that in a minute. But Rebecca, why don't you share with us your knowledge on phases?
All right, and I will ask Lauren Root to keep me honest and correct if I misspeak here. But the phases, there used to only be 5 phases available for your checklist items. And now you have the ability to associate your checklist items with up to, well, how should I say this? There are 10 phases available. Thank you, Brian. And you can build them out in your settings. So you're no longer locked into just these 5 phases. And it shows up in your activity feed. And you can also use it for reporting. So I was just trying to ask that for the benefit of everyone who's in attendance to understand how that comes into play. Exactly.
So very cool, a great concept to break your cases down into these different buckets, these different phases, so that on an individual basis, you can always see right here on the activity feed how far along the case is. And this is all fed from the checklist. Right. But from a reporting standpoint, you're absolutely right, Rebecca. I want to know how many cases I have in initial, how many I have in investigation, how many I have in settlement. And that allows me to control my pipeline, because I never want everything in one bucket. I always want some about to close, some I'm working on, and the pipeline coming in as well.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for joining. I thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I appreciate it.
Of course. No problem. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm at 12:53. I am overtime. I want to say thank you, everyone, for their patience today. I really appreciate you putting up with me. Hopefully, you learned some cool tips and tricks. Eric and I will put our heads together and see what I might have missed, and a way that we can provide that to you all and make your time worthwhile. Like I said, there's one more thing I want to share with you at the end here, and that is the concept of Neos University. So Neos Academy is this series of webinars that we offer every month on different specific subjects. And Neos University is an online e-training on-demand platform for you and your staff. So the basic concept is you come to this link, neos-university.thinkific.com. And for the moment, we have the Neos beginner course. And myself and Rebecca and Lauren and a whole bunch of other people help build this out. But basically, this is a full introduction to Neos for beginner users. So if you have new staff or you're a firm just getting up and running on Neos, this is a great option for you. There's a lot. There's about 6 to 7 hours worth of content here, depending on how fast you go. So I recommend breaking it up into blocks. But Every user that goes through this course is going to be quizzed along the way, and there's a final assessment at the end. Passing that assessment, which basically means you paid attention during all of this course material, you are now a certified Neos beginner user. You'll actually get a Credly badge that you can share on LinkedIn, your digital resume, give it a stamp. So this is a great way to make sure that your staff is up and running with their Neos knowledge, and they understand how to work their side of the checklist. So definitely check out this link. I am going to, we'll call it there. Eric, thank you, buddy. I'm sorry for your technical issues.
I hate I had them too, but I appreciate everything. And I'm just, hopefully it'll be today. It'll be resolved.
Fair enough. Well, I wish you the best there. Let me go ahead and put my PowerPoint back up with our final slide here. So you can check out more webinars at assemblysoftware.com/neos-academy, or sign up for the new e-learning platform at neos-university.thinkific.com. My daughter was homesick from camp yesterday, and she absolutely insisted that I put a pink unicorn in this presentation. So that's for you, Zoe. Guys, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Good luck with the rest of your day, and we'll be following up with more checklist content for you. All right. Have a good one, everybody.
Great job.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Bye-bye.